At first, they believed it was a glorious idea. To the alien species known as the Graxians, humans were unlike anything they had ever seen. The Graxians had fought many races before. Some were stronger, some faster, some smarter. But none were like the humans. None fought the way humans did. On the battlefield, humans looked fragile. Their bodies bled easily. Their bones broke. Their skin burned. Yet even when wounded, even when dying, they refused to stop. To the Graxians, it was terrifying and beautiful. One scientist named Rethkal had seen it with his own eyes. He watched a human soldier continue to fight after losing an arm. Another, half his face burned by plasma fire, kept crawling forward, dragging himself toward the enemy line. And when he finally fell, he was still clutching his weapon. The Graxians were stunned. How could a creature so weak survive such pain? How could it keep fighting when every logic of biology said it should die? They fight like diseased gods, one Graxian general whispered, raging against the heavens themselves. And so a terrible idea was born. If humans were this strong, this driven, why not clone them? Why not create an army of perfect human soldiers who could fight for the Graxian Empire? The scientists began their work in secret. They gathered samples from fallen battlefields, captured prisoners, and genetic material taken from human remains. They studied the human body, muscle, bone, nerve, and mind. They learned how to grow human tissue, how to form organs, and how to build a soldier from the smallest cell. After many failed attempts, they succeeded. The first cloned human opened its eyes. It looked around, breathing fast, confused but alive. The Graxians celebrated. They called the program Project Dawnfire, a new dawn of war. But the celebration did not last long. It soon became clear that the clones were different. Unlike Graxian soldiers who were obedient and cold, these human clones asked questions. They looked at each other with curiosity. They laughed, they hesitated, they dreamed. One was caught staring at the stars for hours, whispering a word no one understood: home. At first, the scientists ignored these small differences. They focused on their goal, to create perfect warriors. But the more they observed, the stranger it became. The clones learned too fast. They moved with a natural rhythm, adapting to every challenge. When they trained with Graxian soldiers, they did not follow orders blindly. They improvised. Sometimes they acted before they were told, and often their way was better. The generals were divided. Some called it genius, others called it danger. Rethkal watched the growing unease in silence. He had begun to feel something he could not explain: fear. These clones were not machines. They were alive. They felt emotions, and something deep within them, still connected to the humans they were copied from. One day, while studying a young clone named Eli, Rethkal saw him pause during training. The clone stared at his reflection in a metal panel. His voice was quiet, trembling. "Who am I?" he asked. No one answered. That question spread through the labs like a virus. Other clones began asking it too. They wanted to know who they were, why they existed, and where the others were, the humans they were made from. Still, the Graxians pushed forward. They had built an army of thousands. Now it was time to test them in battle. The clones were released onto the battlefield, wearing Graxian armor and carrying alien weapons. They were fast, precise, deadly, everything the Empire had dreamed of. The first mission was a complete success. The Graxians cheered, but then something unexpected happened. The enemy, a group of human soldiers, stopped fighting. They froze. They stared at the clones in shock. Some dropped their weapons. Others walked forward, trembling. Rethkal watched through his screens, confused. What was happening? Why did the humans not attack? One human fell to his knees, crying. Another reached out to touch the clone's face, whispering words lost to the static of the transmission. Even the clones seemed confused. They stopped firing. They hesitated. One of them, Eli, lowered his weapon and took a slow step forward, and then the humans did something the Graxians could not explain. They embraced the clones as if they were family. The entire battlefield went silent. Rethkal's heart pounded in his chest. The data feeds filled with strange readings, energy surges, neural responses. something the machines could not understand. The connection between human and clone was real. It was something beyond science. The Graxians shut down the mission. The risk was too great. They locked the clones back inside the facility and began new experiments to understand the link. But the scientists never found an answer. And as they debated and argued in their laboratories, something was already moving across the stars. Something fast, powerful, and angry. The humans had discovered what the Graxians had done, and they were coming. Inside the cold halls of the Graxian cloning facility, silence ruled. The machines hummed softly, lights blinked across the walls, and rows of cloned humans slept inside transparent pods. Rethkal, the chief scientist, stood before them with a troubled heart. The last mission had changed everything. The humans on the battlefield had not fought the clones. They had wept for them. They had called out strange names, reaching for them as if reaching for lost loved ones. The Graxians could not understand it. How could real humans recognize clones they had never seen before? Meetings filled with shouting and fear. Some scientists wanted to destroy the project immediately. Others insisted on continuing to study this strange connection. In the end, the Empire chose to continue. Curiosity was stronger than fear. Rethkal was ordered to test the emotional reaction again, this time under controlled conditions. A human prisoner was brought to the lab, weak-chained and silent. His eyes were filled with hate. Rethkal stood behind the glass wall as the first clone was brought into the chamber. The clone looked calm, confused, still wearing the same training armor from before. When the prisoner saw him, something inside the human snapped. He screamed, a sound so raw and powerful it made the lights flicker. The energy web around him shook violently. Alarms blared. The man tore at the restraints with unnatural strength, shouting words no one understood. And then he began to cry. He fell to the ground, trembling, reaching toward the clone with open arms. The clone, wide-eyed, stepped forward as if pulled by an invisible force. The guards rushed in, dragged both away. The test ended, but it left the entire lab shaking. The reports were clear. Something deep connected human and clone. A signal not from technology, but from the heart, from the soul itself. The next days were chaos. Clones began to behave strangely. They talked less, stared at the stars more. Some whispered names in their sleep. Others woke up screaming, claiming to see faces they didn't know. Rethkal started to realize something horrifying. The clones were beginning to remember. They had flashes of memory that belonged to real humans. Not copies of the mind, but fragments of emotion, laughter, fear, pain, love. It was as if their human originals were calling to them across the void. One night, Rethkal found Eli, the young clone from before, sitting alone in the training hall. "Eli," he said quietly, "why do you not rest?" The clone looked up, eyes glowing faintly under the lab lights. "I heard them," he whispered. "They are looking for us." Rethkal froze. "Who?" "The ones who made us," Eli said softly. "They're coming." The scientist felt his chest tighten. He didn't believe it. He didn't want to believe it. But deep inside, a small voice whispered, "What if it's true?" For days, Rethkal could not sleep. The stars outside the observation window seemed darker than before. The communication towers kept receiving strange signals, encrypted bursts, patterns of light, and distant whispers across the radio bands. Then one morning, the sky screamed, sensors lit up with thousands of red alerts. Massive energy signatures appeared at the edge of the system. "They've come through the jump gate," shouted an officer. Ships, hundreds of them, emerging from the void. Human ships. They didn't attack immediately. They scanned. They searched. They knew where to look. Within minutes, they had identified the planet. The cloning world. Rethkal ran to the command deck, his voice shaking. "We must shut it down. Destroy the facility before they arrive." But it was too late. The humans were already descending. Thousands of drop pods cut through the clouds like burning stars. Boarding torpedoes crashed into buildings. Small human crafts raced past defenses with deadly precision. The Graxian sky filled with fire. Rethkal watched from the tower window, unable to move. Ships exploded in the atmosphere. Anti-air guns fired, but humans kept coming. Wave after wave, they were relentless. Every human soldier that fell was replaced by another. Every line that broke was filled instantly. They moved like a single living being, fighting without fear, without pause. For the first time in his life, Rethkal saw what it meant when humans truly wanted something. It wasn't conquest. It wasn't destruction. It was purpose. He turned to his assistant, voice trembling. "Do you understand? They are not here to destroy us." The assistant blinked in confusion. "Then why are they here?" Rethkal looked out the window again. The sky burned bright with fire and light. "They're here," he whispered, "to take back what we stole." Alarms echoed across the city. The human fleet entered the atmosphere. Dropships landed outside the facility, smashing through defenses as if they weren't even there. The ground shook. Walls cracked. The clones inside their containment pods began to stir, sensing something. A call, a pull. Eli opened his eyes and smiled for the first time. They found us. And as Rethkal watched in horror, the outer gates of the cloning complex exploded in a wave of white fire. Human soldiers flooded through the smoke, their armor glowing, weapons ready. They moved like shadows and thunder, swift and unstoppable. The Graxians fired back, but the humans did not stop. They screamed, they fought, they bled, and they kept coming. The war that was meant to make the perfect warriors had created something else entirely. It had created a reason for humans to fight harder than ever before. And now, nothing in the galaxy could stop them. The first warning came as a low vibration through the floor. Rethkal looked up from his console, his four eyes narrowing. The glass walls around the control room trembled. Outside, the horizon glowed orange. The humans had arrived. Moments later, the sky split open. Thousands of burning trails cut through the atmosphere, human drop pods entering at deadly speed. Some burst apart, scattering debris across the desert plains. Others landed perfectly, slamming into the ground like meteors, and from those pods, the humans emerged. Rethkal watched from the tower window, unable to believe what he saw. Human soldiers poured out in waves, their armor reflecting firelight, their weapons glowing. They screamed as they charged, not in fear but fury. The Graxian anti-air guns opened fire. Plasma bolts streaked upward, hitting some of the falling pods. For every ship destroyed, 3 more broke through. The humans didn't stop. They never stopped. Every order Rethkal shouted was drowned out by the sound of explosions. The air was thick with dust and heat. Communication screens flashed red warnings, breaches in every sector. On the surface, Graxian soldiers struggled to form defensive lines. But the humans didn't attack like any army before them. They moved with a strange rhythm. No commands, no hesitation. Squads seemed to know exactly where to go. One group climbed the tower walls like insects, planting charges in perfect formation. Another team dashed through the corridors, clearing rooms with frightening precision. How were they doing this? One officer shouted. "There's no signal." No leader. Rethkal had no answer. He could only stare at the monitors as the battle unfolded. Every human soldier fought with terrifying focus. Even when hit, they refused to fall. Some crawled forward, dragging themselves toward their goal. Others shielded the wounded with their own bodies. The Graxians fought with machines. The humans fought with heart, and heart, Rethkal realized, was stronger. The facility shook violently. The humans were inside. Rethkal could hear the screams and gunfire echoing through the halls. He turned to his team. "Seal the cloning chambers. Protect the subjects at all costs." But it was already too late. Down in the lower levels, the clones were waking up. The sound of battle had reached them, and something deep within their minds recognized it. Eli was the first to stand. His breathing quickened. He could feel it, a pull, a warmth inside his chest. "They're here," he whispered. "I can feel them." The guards aimed their weapons, shouting orders, but Eli didn't move with fear. He moved with purpose. In one swift motion, he disarmed the nearest Graxian, turned the weapon around, and fired. The energy bolt echoed through the chamber. The other clones followed without hesitation. They were no longer experiments. They were soldiers born of 2 worlds. The humans broke through the final gates moments later. When they entered the facility, smoke and light filled every corridor. What Rethkal saw next would stay in his mind forever. The humans didn't come to conquer. They came to save. As they found the clones, they didn't treat them as tools or weapons. They called out to them, names, words, sounds filled with emotion. Some dropped their rifles and ran forward. Some cried openly, clutching the trembling clones in their arms. Through the surveillance feed, Rethkal watched one human kneel before a small clone, wrapping him in a torn cloak. The soldier's hands shook as he whispered something, words lost to static, but the meaning was clear: love. And then, something strange happened. The clone reached out and touched the soldier's face, and smiled. All around the room, Graxian troops hesitated. They didn't understand what they were witnessing. The humans were fighting and crying at the same time. Their fury and compassion blended into something unstoppable. When the Graxians fired again, the humans responded with terrifying precision. But they never once aimed at the clones. Every shot, every movement, every decision had one purpose: protect them. Outside, the battle raged on. Flames rose from the ground to the clouds. Ships exploded in the air, raining metal and ash. The sky looked alive, burning, bleeding, screaming. Rethkal turned to his assistant. "Call the council. Tell them the war is lost. The war." The assistant stammered. "But we still have—" "No," Rethkal interrupted. His voice was cold. "This isn't a war anymore. This is a rescue." From above, human capital ships entered the atmosphere, enormous vessels breaking every rule of warfare. Instead of bombarding the planet, they landed. They came to take their people home. Rethkal could see them through the smoke, thousands of humans carrying clones out of the ruins. Some were injured, limping, covered in blood, but their arms were full of life. He saw one woman soldier carrying 2 children, firing with one hand as she ran. He saw a man dragging an injured comrade while holding a crying clone close to his chest. They were unstoppable because they were fighting for something no weapon could destroy: love, connection, family. As night fell, the fires reflected off the clouds, painting the world in red and gold. The humans didn't stop until every last clone was found, and Rethkal, standing in the ruins of his laboratory, whispered to himself, "We tried to make perfect warriors, but they already existed." He turned his gaze to the burning sky. For the first time in his life, he felt something new, admiration. But beneath that feeling, another emotion grew stronger: fear. Because if humans could fight like this for a few clones, what would they do if someone threatened all of them? The battle outside still burned like a living storm. Flames painted the horizon red. The ground shook as explosions echoed through the shattered city. Yet inside the ruined cloning facility, something far more powerful was happening, something no weapon could stop. The humans had reached the core. Rethkal stood frozen behind a cracked glass wall, watching as the soldiers of Earth moved through the halls. Their armor was scorched, their faces dirty, but their eyes burned with purpose. They weren't looking for enemies. They were looking for family. Every room they entered, every corridor they cleared, they searched for the clones. The Graxian defenders fired desperately, but the humans didn't slow down. They moved like shadows through the smoke, quick, focused, silent. When they reached the containment chambers, they didn't fire. They dropped their guns. One human knelt beside a clone, gently brushing away wires and metal restraints. The clone, frightened and shaking, tried to back away. The soldier spoke softly, voice trembling. "It's okay. You're safe now." The words meant nothing to the alien machines recording the scene. But Rethkal felt something shift in the air, an emotion so strong it silenced the battle for a moment. The soldier smiled, even as tears rolled down her face. She wrapped the clone in a torn piece of cloth and lifted them into her arms. Behind her, another soldier did the same, whispering softly as if speaking to a child. The Graxians watching on the monitors were confused. "Why are they doing this?" one of them asked. "They could have destroyed everything. Why save these copies?" Rethikal's voice was quiet. Because they don't see copies. They see their children. All across the facility, scenes like this unfolded. Humans carried clones through smoke-filled hallways, shielding them with their bodies. Some were hit by plasma fire but didn't fall. They kept running, refusing to let go. One young soldier, bleeding heavily, held two small clones close to his chest as he stumbled toward the evacuation bay. Another soldier covered him, firing at enemies with one arm while dragging a wounded comrade with the other. Even the Graxian troops began to hesitate. They watched as humans fought and wept at the same time, warriors filled with both fury and tenderness. It made no sense to them. In the middle of the chaos, Rethkal descended from the control room. He walked through smoke and debris until he reached the central lab. There, among the shattered glass and burning machines, he saw a human kneeling beside Eli, the first clone ever created. The soldier reached out a hand. Eli hesitated for a moment, eyes wide. Then slowly he took it, and in that simple touch, Rethkal saw what no science could ever create: connection, not from blood, not from memory, but from something deeper, something alive. Rethkal's assistant shouted, "They're surrounding the complex. We have to escape." But Rethkal didn't move. His gaze stayed fixed on the humans and clones, embracing in the center of the lab. "This is not a war," he whispered. It never was. Outside, the storm of battle raged on. Dropships descended through fire and smoke, landing across the facility. Human medics poured out, rushing to treat the injured, both clone and soldier alike. They used their own bandages, their own supplies, sharing water and medicine with the wounded clones. One medic sat beside a Graxian soldier who had dropped his weapon, too shocked to fight. She pressed a patch to his wound without a word. The Graxian looked at her, trembling. "Why, help me." She met his eyes. "Because no one deserves to die like this." The words hit Rethkal harder than any weapon. He realized something terrible. They had tried to create monsters out of humanity. Instead, they had discovered what made them human. Hours passed, and the noise of battle began to fade. The humans secured every corridor, every lab, every chamber. They gathered the clones in the main hangar, wrapping them in blankets, offering them food and warmth. Many of the clones had never spoken before, but now voices filled the room, soft, confused, hopeful. Some called the humans mother or father without knowing why. Others simply held their rescuers' hands, afraid to let go. Rethkal stood among the ruins, his heart heavy. He turned to his assistant. "They could have wiped us out," he said quietly. "But they didn't." The assistant shook his head. "Then why fight us at all?" Rethkal looked at the humans, their faces lit by the fires outside. "Because we took what mattered most to them," he said, "and they came to take it back." Through the open roof, Rethkal could see the stars again, dimmed by smoke but still shining. Human ships moved above the planet, forming protective orbits. Shuttles lifted off, carrying the rescued clones to safety. He watched one final scene before turning away. A human woman stood beside a transport ramp, holding a small child, one of the clones, in her arms. The child touched her face gently, whispering a single word: "Home." The woman smiled through her tears. "Yes," she said softly. "Home!" The engines roared. The transport rose into the sky, leaving behind only silence and ash. Rethkal lowered his head. The war he thought would bring glory had instead shown him truth. Humans did not fight because they loved war. They fought because they loved each other, and in that moment he understood. No empire, no army, no experiment could ever defeat that. The world was silent now. The fires that had once lit the night were slowly dying. Thick black smoke rose into the sky, carried away by cold winds. The cloning facility, once the pride of the Graxian Empire, now stood in ruins. Inside the council chambers, the air was heavy with fear. Screens flickered with reports, cities lost, fleets destroyed, colonies silent. Every message ended the same way: human forces advancing. High Councillor Vareth slammed his claws on the table. "This cannot be real. They were outnumbered. Outgunned. We had control of the systems." No one answered. Each counselor had seen the same thing, humans advancing through their planets like a tide that no weapon could stop. They fought without pause, without command signals, without surrender, and yet they did not destroy without reason. They attacked only where clones were kept. Every strike was precise, focused, and terrifyingly fast. Vareth turned toward Rethkal, who stood quietly in the corner. "You studied them." "Explain this madness." Rethkal met his gaze. His voice was calm, but his eyes were filled with something deeper. Regret. "They fight with purpose," he said. "We thought they were savage, but everything they do has meaning. They do not kill for victory. They fight for those they love." The room fell silent. Vareth growled. "Love? You speak of emotion as if it were a weapon." Rethkal nodded slowly. "It is. The strongest one they have." Before anyone could respond, an alarm echoed through the chamber. The walls shook. The lights dimmed. A voice came through the intercom, trembling and broken. "Counselors, the humans have entered orbit." Gasps filled the room. Vareth rushed to the window. Above the planet, thousands of ships glimmered like stars. Human vessels, small, fast, and deadly, surrounded the world. A fleet commander shouted, "Raise the shields! Prepare orbital cannons!" But Rethkal spoke again, voice low. "It won't matter. They're not here to destroy. They're here to end this." Down on the surface, human dropships began to descend once more. But this time, there was no sound of plasma fire, no bombardments, no explosions. They landed softly, like caretakers returning to a grave. Teams of human soldiers spread out, scanning the ruins. They weren't carrying rifles. They carried medical crates, scanners, and data drives. They began collecting the surviving clones left behind, and even injured Graxian scientists. One Graxian soldier, bleeding on the ground, looked up in disbelief as a human knelt beside him. The human pressed a patch to his wound and whispered, "Stay still." The soldier stared. "You save me?" The human only nodded. "No more killing." Rethkal stood at the edge of the landing zone, watching in silence. He saw the humans move with discipline and care. No shouting, no rage, only quiet efficiency. It was over, and yet it wasn't, because something inside him had changed. He remembered the first time he had seen them, humans screaming in battle, covered in blood and fire, unstoppable. He had thought them monsters, but now he saw the truth. Those same hands that destroyed cities also carried children, comforted the dying, and offered mercy to their enemies. Rethkal approached one of the soldiers, a tall human with tired eyes. "You have won," Rethkal said. "Why do you show mercy to those who harmed your kind?" The soldier looked at him quietly, then replied, "Because mercy is the only thing that keeps us human." The words hit Rethkal harder than any weapon. Behind them, human engineers were shutting down the cloning machines, carefully dismantling each one. They didn't burn or smash them. They took them apart piece by piece, making sure no more suffering would come from them. Vareth, watching from a distance, couldn't accept it. He shouted across the ruins, "You could rule the galaxy. You could destroy us all. Why stop now?" The human commander turned to him, voice calm and heavy with meaning. "We didn't come to rule," she said. "We came to bring our children home." And just like that, every Graxian soldier lowered their weapon. No orders, no threats, just silence and understanding. Hours later, the human fleet began to withdraw. Dropships lifted off, carrying both humans and rescued clones to orbit. The sky filled with the glow of their engines as they left behind a broken empire. Rethkal watched as the last ship rose into the stars. He whispered to himself, "We tried to make perfect warriors, and instead we met perfect hearts." The war was over, but the lesson remained. Across the galaxy, races would speak of that day, the day the humans came, not as conquerors but as saviors. The day they taught even their enemies what it truly meant to fight for something worth protecting. And as Rethkal stood among the ashes, he knew one truth above all: you can defeat armies. You can destroy empires, but you can never break the will of those who fight for love. The war had ended, but the silence it left behind was louder than any explosion. The skies were empty now, the human ships long gone. Only smoke and quiet winds remained, whispering through the ruins of the cloning facility. What once had been a place of creation was now a graveyard of machines and broken dreams. Rethkal walked slowly through the corridors. The walls were scorched, the lights dim, and every step echoed with memories of screams, both human and alien. He reached the main control chamber where the cloning pods once stood. Now every pod was open. The humans had taken their clones, their children, home. On the central console, among the shattered glass and burnt wires, something blinked faintly. A small holographic beacon, still active. Rethkal touched the surface, and a human voice filled the room. "To whoever finds this, we were never your enemies." The hologram flickered, showing a human woman in battle armor. Her face was tired, covered in dust and ash, but her eyes were calm. Behind her, rescued clones moved quietly, being treated and cared for. "You tried to understand us," she continued softly. "You studied our bodies, our strength, our limits, but you never studied our hearts. You cannot clone what makes us human." The room fell still. Even the machine seemed to listen. "We don't fight because we love war," she said. "We fight because we love those who stand behind us. We fight for our families, our children, our home. And we will never stop protecting them, no matter the cost." The hologram paused for a moment. Her voice trembled slightly. "You thought we were monsters because we never gave up. But we never give up because we can't bear to lose what we love. That's who we are." The message ended. The hologram flickered, and then one last line appeared on the console, written in their language. "Do not fear humanity. Learn from it." Rethkal stood there, unmoving. The words burned into his mind. He remembered the humans, carrying their wounded enemies, the way they sang to their rescued clones, the tears they shed for every life lost. He remembered their strength, not just in battle but in compassion. All his life he had believed that victory came from power, from perfect soldiers and perfect weapons. But now he saw how wrong they had been. The humans were imperfect, fragile, emotional, yet it was that imperfection that made them unstoppable. Rethkal turned as footsteps echoed behind him. It was Vareth, limping and scarred. The once proud High Counselor looked older now, his voice shaking. "Is it true?" Vareth asked. "Did they leave a message?" Rethkal nodded. "Yes, and I think it was meant for all of us." Vareth stared at the blank console for a long time. "We lost everything," he said softly. "Our fleets, our cities, our pride." "You lost more than that," Rethkal replied. "You lost your understanding of what life truly means." Outside, the sun broke through the thick clouds for the first time in many cycles. The light touched the ruins, warming the metal walls that had once held life captive. Rethkal looked up at the sky. "They could have destroyed us," he whispered. "But instead, they showed mercy. They left us a choice." Vareth frowned. "A choice?" Rethkal turned to him. "To become better, or to repeat our mistakes?" For a long time, neither spoke. The only sound was the wind and the soft hum of the last machines shutting down. Then Rethkal did something unexpected. He kneeled before the console, placed his clawed hand over the human symbol, and whispered, "We will learn." The beacon's light faded, leaving the chamber in darkness. But in that darkness, something new had begun, understanding, weeks later across the stars. The stories spread. Aliens whispered of the human rescue war, of how an entire empire fell, not to bombs or fleets, but to compassion and courage. They said the humans did not conquer, they healed. They said their soldiers were demons in battle, but angels in peace, and across 1,000 worlds, leaders began to ask the same question: what makes them so powerful? The answer was never hidden. It was written in the ruins of a cloning facility, glowing faintly in forgotten code. The strength of humanity is not in muscle or mind, but in the heart. As Rethkal watched the dawn rise over his broken world, he finally understood they had not tried to create monsters. They had tried to create perfection. But what they found instead was humanity, and that, he realized, could never be cloned.